I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.
Hello and welcome to the Counter Narrative Show. Tonight's topic is the politics of pleasure. We're going to be talking a bit about sex, vaginal care, and kink. I am joined by two fantastic women in this field, in this industry, to talk about this topic, to ask questions. So if you are here and you have questions around the politics of pleasure, things that you want to engage in a conversation with about sex by people who not only practice this work, but educate others in a lot of this work. Please go ahead and get started engaging. Think about your questions. Go ahead and feel free to type them in the chat. If you know someone else who might be interested in this content, please feel free to also, thank you, computer. Please feel free to also share that information. I am joined by Bree Renee and Dame Sadie. I'm going to go ahead and get started and tell you a little bit about their bio, but I won't let their bio hog all the spotlight. I'm going to then hand it over to them, and then we're just going to engage into some conversational biographical information so that you can get to know them a little bit better. So let's start with Bree. Bree is an avid believer in love, a burgeoning sexpert, and self-proclaimed spiritual badass. She is a certified Reiki master, certified yoga teacher, and has studied religions and spiritual practices, astrology, numerology, spiritual nutrition. I've never heard of spiritual nutrition. And many forms of divination, specializing in tarot card readings and dream interpretation. Bree is also a blogger, a podcast host, and soon to be a published author. Thank you so much for joining us, Bree. I appreciate you being here.
I'm excited to be here.
Hi. And then, of course, we have Dame Sadie. Dame Sadie is said to be the love child of Okoye and Maleficent, which I just have all kinds of conjuring visuals in my mind. Can I tell you, I appreciate that visual. Master Seduction, aka Dame Sadie, is a Black polyam queer femme dom artist, burlesque performer, kinkster, educator, coach, community healer. The combination of seduction, intelligence, natural leadership skills, and the presence will make you want to learn from her and to submit to her, or both. Thank you both for being here. I am getting just jazzed up and excited just by reading your bio. So I can imagine what this conversation is going to be like. Again, folks, I have my own set of questions. If you have questions, feel free to please write them, type them into the chat. And I'm going to leave an opportunity at the end of the show for both Bree and Dame Sadie to share their information of how you can follow them and what they're up to next. But for right now, make sure that you're taking down or writing down any questions that you may have while you have them live, present, and available to you in this moment. Take advantage of this fantastic opportunity. Bree, I'm going to start with you. I want to ask you a bit more about how you're coming to this experience of a sexpert, and exactly what does it mean to be a sexpert when you say that?
Okay, so when I think sexpert, I think of someone that is super duper knowledgeable about all things that pertain to sex. So anything that has to do with penetration, oral sex, foreplay, anything that kind of goes into creating some type of sexual experience, this would be somebody that knows those things. I also, you said the kink for Dame Sadie, and I got excited because I'm actually the president of a kink group that has 2 chapters, one in Louisville, Kentucky, my hometown, and one here in Dallas, where I'm at now. So I am really into like the BDSM and kink aspect of things too. So I think that kind of gives me like a edge that a lot of other sexperts don't have, because they just have vanilla experience. So I think having that BDSM knowledge and that kink and fetish knowledge kind of helps me a lot when I am working with like clients and stuff that have certain things that, you know, the one partner might think that's completely weird and is like, absolutely not. And the other partner is like, but this is what I like. And I kind of have that ability to kind of work through that with them. But I kind of got into all of this on accident. the sex part, the sex stuff. I, I just have always been a super open person. So I've always been willing. I don't like to say I don't like something until I try it and I have a reason why I don't like it. So just really being open and having these experiences with different partners kind of led me into, okay, I like that. Let me research it. And then that all kind of put me into researching different things and kind of opened the floodgates to me wanting to gain these experiences and to learn about all of this stuff. So, yeah.
Love it. I love how you say you kind of got into it by accident. Because I feel like I really like that because it's one of the things that it does for me is it speaks to exploration. It speaks to an openness. It doesn't speak to a person who have necessarily a specific agenda.
Right.
It's like this open exploration and being particular type of openness. So thank you for sharing that. So Dame Sadie, same question for you. How did you come to this work or this practice?
I think like Bree, I believe that this work sometimes comes with us and we just have to like arrive enough in it to our clear selves to be able to access it. For those of us that do it from like a spiritual, like healing, informed perspective, because I understand that's not everybody's truth. But for those of us that it resonates from like a deeper place, I really do think it came with us. We just had to like get in alignment to receive it, because it is a form of healing, like kink, BDSM, any sort of sexual exploration, especially if you're a Black or brown person, you're moving into like, revolutionary, liberatory acts when you talk about your pleasure and how you unpack it and deciding to just do whatever the fuck you want. Can I curse? Do whatever you want.
Yes, you curse.
Do whatever you want and allow yourself to feel the things that you feel unabashedly without shame and like the importance of that. So my story kind of started with that. I didn't grow up in a organized religion system to have to combat. So I really kind of give 75% of the credit to that, because I realized so much of pleasure work is stifled by a lot of people's religious foundations. So I didn't have that. So around 16, I was on go, right? I was like, hey, how do we, I was kind of like chasing the movie vibe. I'm like, how do we do what they're doing in the movies? And it wasn't working. And then around 16, I became a stripper. And I did that for about 8 years. And I was stripping during a time that like, I was in underground strip clubs because I was underage. So it was like a lap dance club, but also you could like, I don't know, fuck somebody or get your dick sucked for like $10 for 10 minutes, right? So it was one of those places where you really had to have something. And that's how I started moving into doing like BDSM in my performance. So I started incorporating toys and fire and, lighting up things on parts of my body and shooting water out of places and just really kind of expanding my act. And then it kind of trickled into my like pleasure in sex life. But I do think the key was what you said, like that exploration and creativity and just being open enough to be like, hey, let me try this, let me try that. So
yeah, absolutely. I noticed in both of your bios, you mentioned being a Reiki practitioner or doing having Reiki as an aspect of your practice or something that you are familiar with. How has Reiki or has it informed your sexual practice or your approach to sex?
You take that, or I can go.
Oh, I'll wait. You go ahead. I can wait.
I think for me, I always like to preface things with, I don't heal people, people heal themselves. I might be the vessel for the energy that you're getting to heal yourself, but I am not healing you. I think for me, and this is like before I started doing the research and being like, I really need to get this certification. It was more of like, I'm a Dom. And I was actually a professional Dom for 2 years. And then I retired. But I think in that process of, learning about the Dom sub dynamics and learning about kink and learning about how kinks and fetishes kind of have a major part in people's like sex. that kind of led me to start, okay, now I'm starting to understand the why and the how. And it kind of opened up the door for me to understand that when I have a sub, or when I have a partner or someone that is in the sub space, that's the space where the subs go when they're, subbing, for lack of a better term. It's like a mind space. So when that person is in that subspace, they are able to completely relinquish all control within their boundaries to me. So I am now responsible for this person. And I just felt that I was already kind of providing that vessel for that person to even be able to get into that space, and providing that trust and that building that relationship and that foundation. And the Reiki seemed kind of like a no-brainer. And now that I have the certification, it's basically just me being conscious of what I've already been doing. So now I can go into it with intention, especially if it's somebody that knows about my spiritual practice and my business and knows that I do offer those services. Sometimes they will say, hey, I know you do this too. Is there any way that we can do both? And I'm like, yes, we can. So I think, if anything, Reiki has just added to all of the things that I already do and provided me a conscious way to contribute to those things.
Love that. Dame Sadie, you also mentioned ways in which this work can be healing, particularly for people of color, and then just exploring pleasure without shame. Can you talk a little bit more about the ways in which exploring pleasure and exploring sex, how is this practice? How can it be healing?
So that actually kind of partners well with the question you just asked, Bree, in terms of like Reiki and energy healing. One of the spaces that I've been in with people before is called a cathartic release. So sometimes when you're playing and you're in a scene with particularly people who are spiritually powerful or energetically powerful, they can like pull you into, and sometimes through, like sometimes what feels like engaging with your trauma. And it can cause a release. Sometimes you can cry. Like there are all kinds of ways that people have this experience of a cathartic release through play. And I was having that experience because I developed, a skill set to be able to do it, but I didn't know what always to do after they had that moment, right? So I knew, there's teas and there's music you can play and things like that. And then I started receiving Reiki treatments for myself and like my own healing. And I was like, oh, okay, this could be a thing to like help people align themselves after we go to a certain depth and they drop into that subspace that Bree was talking about, like helping them to come back to present, to like body space. That's what I use Reiki for in terms of my kink. But I also kind of merged my Reiki and my kink into like an intuitive approach to it. So there's a intuitive wax session that I've developed, which is a combination of like herbal treatments, crystal Reiki, Reiki work, and a whole lot of hot wax. I am a sensual sadist, so I really enjoy sensory experiences. And I have worked to understand how those experiences can cause energetic releases or, that cathartic space. Sometimes just complete bliss. Like it's not always like you're sad and you're engaging with trauma. Sometimes you just go 10 stages up in the clouds and I gotta like bring you down before I let you go outside. So that energy work really was important because most of the people that I play with are, Black, queer, femme, and or women, AFAT people, trans women. Like I prefer actually to play with non-cis people in my experiences, and which often means that I am engaging with shame, trauma, just by the nature of the way that we live in the world. It's not really easy to move through the world as a Black queer person and not engage with shame. So the way that I look at kink is that is the place to like start to peel some of that away, to like take the cheese grater to the concrete that the world has caused you to pour on yourself so that you can be that strong Black woman or whatever it is the world wants to tell us we should be, right? Like for me, kink is that space where you get to intentionally set that down and like move through whatever primal feelings your body engages with. And we don't have, I mean, I know I don't have a lot of spaces in my life where I'm able to do that. And neither do the people that I play with, and I'm sure the people that Bree works with. So it's super important that we as educators, right? And I agree with Bree, we are not the healers. Like that's what they teach you in Reiki, is like, it's not you, it's the energy that's moving through you. So don't even like get wrapped up in that, you know? But using it as a tool to help people access their own medicine within themselves.
Thank you so much for that. I'm just hearing so much connection between healing and the spiritual practice aspect of it. And Bree, I know in your bio, it mentions being a spiritual nutritionist. And just because we've just brought up spiritual, I really want to talk a little bit about what a spiritual nutritionist is and how that might play into some of the work that you do.
Okay, so with everything has energy. So that's going to include your food. And if you notice people that put processed foods, too much salt, too much sugar, all of that into their bodies are not giving the output that they would desire. So with spiritual nutrition, it's more or less about just taking into consideration where your food comes from, even down to like who prepares your food. You know, you don't want somebody with, and I hate using like all the negative energy and good vibes. I hate those terms. But you don't want someone with negative energy or bad juju making your food. So it's more about being intentional with what you put into your body, being more intentional when you are cooking. You know, if you're coming home and you've worked a 12-hour shift and now you're cooking, you're going to make crap because it's easier to make crap, when really you need to focus more on listening to your body and kind of intuiting what your body needs. Your body will let you know when you're hungry, how much to eat, if you're thirsty, if you're dehydrated. Your body kind of lets you know all of these things. And to me, spiritual nutrition is more about learning how to listen to your body and your intuition when it tells you these things. Like when people have cravings, that's normally because you don't have that in your diet. So you might be, you know, craving something in particular, and that food has this ingredient which has this vitamin in it. And your body is telling you you need that vitamin by making you crave that food. So spiritual nutrition is just all about tapping into basically listening to your body, what your body's telling you you need to eat. Not saying you like ignore dietary standards or whatever, but you take a more holistic approach to incorporating healthier, which would be higher vibrational, but healthier foods into your diet so that you can be a healthier you. And the healthier you is always going to have an easier time getting to the highest form of you. So that's what it is.
Love that. That feels so mind, body, soul, or mind, body, spirit. I love that. And it's so good. I feel like I really appreciate both of your backgrounds because it doesn't sound like either of you come at this from a strictly textbook form, strictly textbook way, or even in a strictly I'm going to stay in this particular lane way. It sounds like you both have this super holistic approach. As we get deeper into the conversation, and we've even thrown these words around a little bit in this conversation, but Dame Sadie, I'd like you to define for us, if you wouldn't mind, kink and fetish, and what is there a difference between those? What do they mean? That sort of thing.
Yes.
Uh-oh, did her screen freeze?
I think so. Uh-oh,
SpaghettiOs.
You might picture if you have a foot fetish. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Okay. If you were saying something, I didn't hear any of it. If you could start.
Okay, so I was saying that a fetish, the word fetish, I think is what most people actually think about when they think about kink. They're actually thinking about a fetish.
Yep.
right? So fetish is, I need this thing to get off, to get aroused. Like, I need this thing. Kink is, I am choosing to engage with pleasure outside of the box that society has created for sex, right? So if you're choosing technically to do anything that's not penis and vagina sex, it can somewhere be considered kinky, right? Because for some people, anal sex is kinky, right? For some people, doggy style is kinky. For some people, 69 is kinky, right? So some people like to use kink as a definition of specific activities. I think that that's limiting and doesn't allow people to understand that it doesn't have to be some grandiose thing that happens. That kink is really just deciding to think outside the box of the way that you engage with your pleasure.
Thank you for that. With that being said, Bree, how would you add to that to say identify, like, what would a person how would a person identify the differences between kink and fetish?
I think Dame Sadie gave a very concise answer. It was on point. That's exactly what it is. I think, like she said, a lot of people, when they think kink, they're really thinking fetishes. And I think because people don't understand the terminology, they kind of get confused on what they like. Whenever people join my group, like ask questions about joining my group, they're thinking they're either walking into an orgy or they're walking into, they're going to see somebody strung up to the ceiling getting like beaten. And I'm like, you might see that, you never know, but that's not all that it is. So I think I completely agree with the definition she provided. And I mean, I think people need to do their research. Like,
research.
Stuff is easily available to you. You just have to look for it. So I completely agree. I don't have anything to add on because that was what it was.
I think it's also to highlight a little bit of what Bree just said. Kink and sex are not the same thing. They do not inherently go together. Just because you kink with somebody doesn't mean you want to fuck them.
Right.
Like,
when I was a pro dom, I did not have sex with any of my clients.
Most of the doms that I know, to be honest, unless that is specifically negotiated, that's not happening unless they're in like a dynamic, they're proper, like there's a pre-negotiated way that it happens. Yep. What I find is a lot of people get into kink and they're thinking that it's the swinger. So swinging and kink is two different things. Right? Two different places, two different vibes. When you walk into the room of a kink space, is different than a swinger place, right? So I think that's also super important to mention that, like, fetish nor kink is inherently sexual or inherently sex, or it doesn't always encompass sex. Like, there should be especially people cannot consent in subspace.
Exactly.
So as a dom, I shouldn't even be having sex with you if you're in subspace, unless we know, like, we've already negotiated that. It was already clear. It is technically a violation of consent to have sex with the person while they're under subspace, unless they have already negotiated that with you, right? Because subspace is an altered state of consciousness. So, I always like to mention that, because people think that, oh, just because I let them spank me, then that means I have to let them do this next thing. And that's those things don't always
work. Not how it works at all.
This conversation is so good. So if you are just tuning in, you're watching the Counter Narrative Show, and we are talking the politics of pleasure with Dame Sadie and Bree. On that topic of, first of all, I appreciate the ways in which there's so much consideration for safety, and not even just physical safety, but mental and emotional safety with the care, and consent is such a thing. And I feel like there's a way in which that probably shows up in these spaces more so than in very heteronormative, vanilla spaces, because there's so much that's assumed. It's assumed. So this kind of pushes you to communicate and have conversations about what is taking place, how it's taking place, and what folks are okay with. So I super appreciate that. And also the ways in which you both take so much responsibility over the roles that you're playing when just even the acknowledgement of a power dynamic. I feel like so often we don't even want to acknowledge that there are power dynamics in our interaction, but the acknowledgement.
You cannot be in relation with a person without there being some sort of, and the power dynamic may change, it may shift, the language you use may look whatever, but if you're in relationship, there is a power dynamic.
Absolutely, 1000%. And I feel like because there's this desire to not even acknowledge that, there's no conversation around what is happening and what it means when this person makes a request at this power level, given, I mean, I could go down a whole rabbit hole, but I won't. What I do want to go back to, Dame, is something that you said earlier when you were talking about the differences between sex and kink. Let's even start from ground zero, because I think that the ways in which people define sex are different, right? There are some people who feel like you're not having sex if you're not penetrating. Could you get into some of the definitions or expansive definitions that exist of sex? How do you define sex?
I might just be the most confusing hoe to do that, because actually it's my life mission to unpack all of those words. It's to okay, we have to use it because it's the language that we have, but I truly believe that it is unique to each person, right? Like what sex for you is different than what sex for me. And the only way we know that is to have the conversation about it, some way, shape, or form. So what sex is really relative to the people. We actually I host the Kink conversation on Thursday, and we had a whole conversation about what is sex. And the basic thing we could get it boiled down to that encompassed everybody's definition was an intentional, energetic exchange for the purpose of pleasure.
I love that.
Ooh,
there was no body parts, no assumed penetrate, in order to, because everybody's definition was so different that was the only thing that we could come up with that sort of encompassed it. So, I encourage people to develop their own baseline definitions for some of these words. Like Google it, sure, look and see what other people are saying. But I don't believe in adopting terminology just because it's the word that Webster says, because Webster got a lot of fucked up shit in it. Like a lot of the language you use is not correct. It's not inclusive, so ask yourself that question, like, what is sex to you? When do you know you're engaging with sex? How do you know that you had sex? And like I said, sex and kink being different, there are asexual kinksters. There are people who engage with kinks specifically for spiritual practice or just for an emotional release. It's not inherently sexual. There are some people who kink is the sex, right? Like, that is how I'm having sex. I am penetrating you with my flogger, right? Not actually even penetrating you with it, but just hitting you with it, which if you talk about energetics, we can go down a whole list of ways you can penetrate a person if we're talking about energetically, right? So that's why you have to expand and think about how your body receives penetration, because I feel penetrated when somebody bites me the right way. I feel that, so it is thinking about what you need to have a baseline of what sex is. What is pleasure for you? I will say kink ain't kink if there is no presence of negotiation, okay? There needs to be negotiation. At minimum, there should be a negotiation period, a safe word, and some discussion about aftercare. If you don't have those three things, you're not kinking. You're doing something else, and maybe you're fooling around or something, but those are the three established things basically that you need to have, right? Yep. Negotiation is going to tell you what we're doing, how far we're going, and we're going to try to do negotiation as sober, clear minds, right? We're not negotiating when we in the scene, you already hot and heavy, because again, you're engaging with that power space, right? That it's like when I'm in the dungeon doing demos, people walk up to me and they're like, here, do whatever you want. And there are some dominants who will take that as an invite to do whatever they want, right? So you have to be careful Because for me, it's like, oh, little baby, you don't even know. There's a whole list of things I could do to you that you couldn't even imagine. You just asked me to do whatever I want. You have no idea where my mind would go. You know? And that to me just means that this is the person needs a little bit more education. We need to go through like how they do that, right? I'm gonna send them a card so we can do a coaching session or something. So it is definitely about knowing your own definitions of those things, but you always want to have negotiation, safe word. Most of the universal safe word in most places is red. Some people, they have their own depending on what they negotiate. Some people safe word using the color system of red, yellow, green. You hear red and yellow mostly. Some people use green, like I use green, because sometimes when you're playing with people, they don't know what to say when you're checking in with them. You're like, you good? And they just like, ugh. So green just means, yes, I'm good, right? Yellow, again, needs to be talked about in your negotiation, because does yellow mean slow down? Does it mean ease up? Does it mean switch places? Like you need to talk about that in negotiation. And then aftercare. Aftercare is the bare minimum of what you need to be able to leaving out of the space, right? So with aftercare, it is assumed that the dominant has to give aftercare. That is not always the case. If you are a dom who does not like to do aftercare, you should say that in your negotiation. And at minimum, it sort of is depending on how far you take a person, right? If you don't want to offer aftercare, then you shouldn't be taking people to level 10.
Right, for sure.
Right? Because you don't want to deal with what may come up in level 10. So like when I'm in the dungeon, you see me at the Crucible doing demos, and like, if I only have you for 5 minutes, the most you're going to get is an intro to what these floggers might feel like. This is stingy, this is study, this is a paddle. I'm not taking you fully into a whole scene because I can't tend to what may come up in that moment, right? So aftercare is saying, how do we tend to what came up for you? What kind of care you need? You need water, a blanket. People tend to get cold when they're in subspace. So like my aftercare bag, I'm not a cuddler. I mean, unless you're my property, I'm generally not just gonna like lay down and cuddle you afterwards. Right. But in my aftercare bag, I generally keep a really soft blanket, a little tiny little stuffed animal, a bottle of water, and like a pack of crackers. So at the bare minimum, I might not cuddle you for your aftercare, but I'm gonna give you this water, these crackers, and this blanket till you get yourself together. Right. So those are the basic things you want to have when you're talking about kink. I mean, sex too. Hell, I mean, if you think about it, all of this is transferable.
I think kink leads to better sex and safer sex because yes, I didn't know to negotiate things or to start speaking my mind as freely as I do now when I engage in sex until I started researching kink. So I think kink opens up the lines of communication because you have to, in order to negotiate, you have to say, this is a hard no for me. This is a soft no for me. What does a soft no mean for you? Does that mean I can just do it? Or does that mean I can ease you into it? So there's so many, it's hella nuanced and there's so many different layers to it. And just being involved as deep in kink as I am now, I look back on sexual experiences and I'm like, I cannot believe I allowed that person to do that to me. Or I can't believe that person let me do that to them. We didn't talk about it beforehand. So yes, it's always super duper interesting. So
yes, it's a growing process. It really is, because it's like the more you know, right?
Yep.
And kink, I think any sort of sex education, I think that should be a question you ask people when you're dating. Have you had adult sex education? Where have you learned, like for real? Because if a person's education stopped in high school, they probably ain't really engaging in the safest ways, because we aren't taught like negotiation and proper consent and coercion, and we don't learn that as teenagers. So the only way you're going to really get it is to sit in something like this, or to go to a class, or to opt in. And there are so many options. You don't have to pay for it. There are free conferences. There are all kinds of places you can go to expand your your knowledge base, right? Because you don't have to want to do it all to learn it. That's one of the things. Like, I will sit and learn anything. I will watch somebody demo it, teach it, whether I want to do it or not, just because it expands my frame of reference, right? And I think that's what I agree with Bree saying, is like, once you get into kink, because it's like somebody snatches the blinders off your eyes. Like, you can't unsee it once you've seen it, right? One of my first big kink weekends was the last Weekend Reunion. And Weekend Reunion was this Black hotel takeover BDSM party. And they pretty much took over this whole hotel in New Jersey, covered the windows. We had every room booked, the courtyard. So there are all of these Black bodies walking around naked, spanking people. I watched these femdoms put this white dude in a bag in the pool and like dunk his ass and like listen to him scream. Like, it was just this space where Black people were, I mean, there was a person who was probably maybe 6'4", 400 pounds, walked around naked the whole weekend. Right. So it was this space of liberation that I've never seen again anywhere else. And so I was like, damn, this is what's supposed to be happening. Like, I walked around half naked with floggers attached to my hips, didn't get catcalled, didn't get like, hey girl, you know, because people in that environment understood what we were there for. And that they understood the approach, right? So they understood that walking up to me being like, so let me buy you a drink. That wasn't going to work, right? So it is a space where, as you engage in safer spaces and you learn about negotiation and consent, and you experience being so free that you're like squirting all over the floor while 20 people are watching you, you can't really undo that. Like, it takes you in this vortex, you know?
I love it. I really love the comment that you said earlier, Dame, in terms of like, this is, while things like negotiation and consent, and I forgot what the last one was that you mentioned. The three things that need to be involved in kink should be involved in sex. It should be involved in like interactions, really, like conditions wherein we're interacting with another person, when we're putting them in those things, but we're not taught those things. And it's so interesting that when people think of things like sex and kink and those sort of things, they don't think of spiritual healing. They don't think of consent. They don't think of it as a safe space, but there's so much about it that requires this conversation, that nothing is assumed, that, you know, you do this regular practice of checking in. Bree, earlier you mentioned BDSM. Can you tell folks exactly what that is? Because not everyone knows exactly what BDSM is. What is the acronym? What does it mean?
Okay, so BDSM is bondage, discipline, dominant, submissive, dominant, submissive, sadism, masochism. So it's a lot, it's 4 letters, but it's a lot of words. At the base of that, bondage, I mean, self-explanatory, you like to be tied up and or restrained in some kind of way. Dominant means that you are the top, you are I don't like to say in control, because really the sub is in control, if you think about it. But the dominant is I can't think of a good word for it. The dominant is the dominant, you know, dominant. And then, submissive means that you're submissive to your dominant or to the person you're doing a scene with or whatever y'all's negotiation is. And then sadism means you like to inflict pain. Masochism means you like to receive pain. And you can also be a sadomasochist, and you can like both. So I think BDSM is just a blanket term for all things kinky. That's it. Anything that I would be like, that's not vanilla, I like it, that would be under the term of BDSM. Because I'm starting to find now that I am older, that lots of people have what I would consider vanilla sex, but certain things that I do, they're like, I've never done that before. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is new. I've never had anybody that has not done that before. So I think BDSM just is like a big umbrella that encompasses anything that's not normal, anything that's taboo, anything abnormal, anything new, things that make people blush are gonna be under that BDSM umbrella.
Thank you for that. Dame, is there anything that you would like to add to the BDSM description?
I think the only thing that I would add, because I'm always interested in like the expansiveness, right, is that it's not always pain related, right? So sadism and masochism, people associate sadism with wanting to give pain. Sadism really is, I just enjoy watching any sensation that comes out of your body. You could be in pain, you could be giggling. Like, I like watching a person have a gigglegasm. I get just as much enjoyment out of that as I get out of, spanking somebody purple, right? So I think that that's one of the things that is always good to like kind of mention, is that BDSM is not inherently painful, that you can engage in BDSM and never have an ouch moment. Yeah. So, because that, I know that sometimes scares people and they think like, oh, I just got to be so hardcore. Like, no, you don't.
Would you mind adding to that and talk a bit about, because both you and Bree shared terms that I don't know if everyone knows, DOMs and subs. What exactly is a DOM? What exactly is the sub? And then Bree, I'm going to ask you to expand on it. If you could tell us types of DOMs and types of subs. So Dame, could you give us a definition of what is a DOM? What is a sub?
Okay, so there's DS and there's MS, right? So you can see sort of those two main, because there are lots of iterations of power exchange, but those are the two like bigger common power exchanges that people talk about, right? Which is DS is dominance and submission, MS is master slave, right? And so DS is sort of like, well, maybe I say the other way around. MS is sort of like the extreme version of DS, for lack of a better word, right? MS means that this person has given up a lot of their autonomy. The slave has given a lot of their autonomy to their master, or sometimes all autonomy. But it's all consensual, it's all pre-negotiated, there's contracts involved, there's time put into knowing the person so that you can be a good master to them. You should not just be picking up masters or slaves off the street. Like that is a very intense, intentional building of a dynamic.
Yep. The vetting process should be long.
Yes, years, 2 years. My process is at least 2 years because it is a heavy weight. And I think that people don't think so many people get into being a Dom because they can't wait to tell somebody what to do. And I don't think they realize the magnitude of what that is when a person is laying so much of themselves at your feet. Like, that is a huge responsibility. DS, dominance and submission, is something that you can engage with a little bit easier. It is still contract centered. There still should be negotiation. A Dom and a sub still have a power exchange, but there are normally a little bit more limitations of where they're engaging with that, right? So it may only be at a certain time frame, or under certain conditions or whatever. DS, master slave language, has been called out for being problematic and inherently patriarchal and like all of the things that BDSM actually is. So there is language like the giver and the receiver, right? Some people don't want to be a dominant. They don't want to be a submissive. They can be the receiver. They can be the giver, or the bottom and the top, right? I'm the top, so I'm giving the sensation. I'm the bottom, so I'm receiving the sensation. So you don't actually have to engage with any of that language either. Was that good?
Yeah, no, I didn't know you was done. Listen, I was like, yes, more of this for you. Thank you for that. Bree, building on that, can you tell us a little bit about the types of Dom, sub, for lack of a better word, I'm gonna say archetypes, but types.
Okay. I don't know if they're archetypes, but you're gonna have like big little like parent child type of situations. And it really depends on what the sub and the dom's kinks are, because you could have like a dynamic that has somebody that likes age play. You can have a dynamic that has somebody that is into feet. So I think what it comes down to is incorporating your other kinks and fetishes into it, and then that's kind of what makes it a different kind of dom sub situation. The main ones that I've seen in experience, that I've dealt with subs that wanted race play. I've dealt with subs that wanted humiliation. So it really just kind of comes down to what the terms are that you negotiate with that person. I don't know that, maybe Dame Sadie can answer if there are archetypes, but in my experience, I don't really have those. I just see the more common ones as being like the age play, big and little, and things of that nature. I don't think there's really, I don't want to put it in the box. Like, I don't want to narrow it down to these things, because then I'll feel like I'm excluding somebody because there are so many. So
Yes,
really,
there are so many.
yeah, there, you can do it with like a rope person, and a rope or I forget what it's called, the person that likes to
The
tie
rigger.
rope up.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
The rigger and
the rope bunny, and there's pretty much anything that would be considered under that BDSM umbrella can be used in a dom sub situation if you get creative. So
Yep.
Yes.
I think the place that I see archetypes coming into place is those tests. There are a lot of like BDSM tests.
yeah.
There's a newer one that's out. I don't have the link available, but there's a newer one that is supposed to be more expansive and more gender inclusive and all of those things. And what they refer to as archetypes is exactly what Bree said. Like, you could be a handler, you could be a rigger, you could be a pup, you could be a goddess, you could, like, you could be a pain pig. Like, there are all of these personality ways. Sometimes in my classes, I encourage people to actually look at if they are already kinky, or if they're trying to develop kinky personas, to look at archetypes as like inspiration. Don't like marry yourself to, oh, I'm going to be a dom in this way because that's what they said a dom is, right? For my dominance is a combination of literally like, my pleasure lineage. If anybody's read Adrienne Marie Brown, they talk about your pleasure lineage, and my pleasure lineage is really just a long equation to me being a femdom, right? Like, I think back to how much I loved Eartha Kitt as Catwoman, right? Or I think about when I saw Okoye on stage, I was like, bitch, So I think that when I think of archetypes, I think about the inspiration that I use to draw from, to like kind of create, and not create because it's actually a resonance. It's not a creation, to further resonate who I am as a dominant.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting when you mentioned Eartha Kitt. I think my first person that piqued my interest that I was able to, and I was so young, like kind of resonated with me, and I was like, this is me, she is me, was Suge Avery. Yeah, and I mean, this is me at 9. And I am like all of these things that this free Black woman is, and she's she's an artist, she's liberated, she has her love practice is expansive. That was the first time that I saw me the most fully on television, was when I saw Suge Avery. Yeah. I could go on and on. I don't know. See, I think we just had sex, right? Because here's why. I'm gonna go back to Dame's in intentional energy exchange for the purpose of pleasure. So let me go to your definition. Is it sex if only one person got pleasure?
Well, is that has it an exchange? You exchanging with yourself? If you exchanging with yourself, then that's
Well,
self
we
pleasure. That's
exchange
masturbation.
energy. No, like we exchange energy, but only I got pleasure from it.
I mean, again, you might say it's sex, but that other person
Oh, the
might
person
not
might
say
not say
it's
it.
sex.
Okay. So I guess I can't say that we had sex then. But I feel like it was an energy exchange and I absolutely got pleasure from it. I want to thank you both for coming on. If you're listening, this has been the Counter Narrative Show. We've been talking about the politics of pleasure. Before I let my fantastic guests go, I want to give them opportunity to let you know where you can find them, follow them, connect with them. Bree, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Where can people follow, find, connect with you? And also, what are you up to next?
So you can follow me, usually most active on Instagram. I got too many family members on Facebook. But my Instagram for my personal page is the Bree Renee, TheBrirenee. My business page, if you're interested in, I have a podcast where I discuss metaphysical things. So spirituality, astrology. I talk a lot of astrology on that podcast. Spirituality, astrology. I do talk about sex, kink, and BDSM as well on that, and lots of intersectional womanism things. You can follow my business page on Instagram as well. It is at Love, Sex, and Magic Co. It's all spelled out, so it's at Love, Sex, and Magic Co. You can also head to my website at www.lovesexandmagicco and lovesexandmagic.co. And I pretty much right now it's event season, so I have been going to spend the next couple months doing.
Awesome. Okay, before I go to Dame, you said you're into astrology. What's your sign? Do you know anything about the sex, like people's sex and signs? Is there any correlation between how people are sexually and their sign? And if so, tell me the truth about Virgos, and I'll tell you.
Virgos. No, I'm just kidding. So I am a Sagittarius sun. I have a Sag sun, a Scorpio moon, and a Sag rising. So do with that what you will. So it's a whole bunch of steam. But I think when people look, which all of that compatibility stuff is called synastry. I think when people are looking into that, they're doing it very topically and only looking at sun signs. So when you see those horoscopes or those, is a Virgo compatible with a Sagittarius? Yes and no, because that person has a whole natal chart. So that natal chart is a screenshot of every planetary placement, luminary body, comets, mathematical calculations, everything at the exact time that you were born. So in order to actually look into compatibility, even just sexual compatibility, you would have to do that person's whole chart and compare both charts, because there are different houses and placements that all kind of correlate into sex. I think the most commonly known one would either be your Venus placement or your Mars placement, because your Venus placement is all about your relationships, but your Mars placement is that primal, that primal energy, like we about to get it in type of energy. So the truth about Virgos, I like Virgos. I don't know why. Theoretically, they would say a Sagittarius and a Virgo would not be compatible. But what I do like about Virgos is, even though they're super, super critical of themselves and others, they are super duper organized. And when I see somebody that's super duper organized, I be like, yeah, I like them. So I like people that kind of they might not be perfect, but they kind of have most of their shit together. Especially when they are dealing with other people, because they're so critical of themselves too. So they want people to know, like, I do it and I do this well. So
this is so true. So what I heard you say was Virgos are awesome and amazing in bed. I agree. Um,
Of course, that's what you heard because you're a Virgo. Of course, that's what you heard. It's very
Right.
Virgo of you.
I got to look up my Mars. My Venus, I could tell you, is in Libra, and I
Ooh.
see the great parts of that because I'm always trying to be fair and balanced. But I also see the shadow aspects of it because it's like, if you're doing this to me, I'm gonna balance the scale. You know what I mean? So there's like the dark and light of it, and that's the truth. So I want Dame to say her sign first. And then tell us where can we find you on the interwebs and what you got coming up next.
Okay, so I'm a Pisces, and I know astrologists really hate when I say this, but I believe it's energetically true for me that I'm on the cusp because I'm not on the cusp, but I got a lot of earthy energy in my chart. I'll say that.
Okay.
Maybe that's a better word. Because
uh-oh.
I think she's frozen again.
Okay, that's a sign. That earthy energy.
Literally all over the place.
Oh, wait, could you say it again? It cut off after you said you got a lot of earthy energy. And then
so Taurus, Moon, Gemini rising, Sag Venus. Like, it's just all, like, my chart is literally all over the place.
Got it.
So I have a lot of Pisces qualities where I'm a dreamer and like I'm floaty and I move through the world, but I also have a lot that like grounds me or reminds me to ground myself. I would say, like, hey, you've been floating for like a week. It's time to go sit down. You know?
Listen, it's all about balance. I don't know how much balance I am because I am Virgo, Cap, Libra.
Oh.
Yeah, Libra, actually. Virgo, Cap, Libra. Yeah, it's like too earthy sometimes, but I'm also an artist. So there's that. All right, tell us how we could find you on the interwebs and stalk you respectfully.
I'm on IG at Madam Seduction. And that's like, you know, sort of my personal page, I guess. But it's mostly where I put all of the kinky shit I do. So if you're not into seeing, you know, bodies and kinky shit, don't go follow that page.
Let me say a personal plug for that page really quick. If you are interested in seeing my booty,
yes.
Go to the IG page. The most recent booty is mine.
That is your booty. Yes, it is. Thank you for that too. It was a great picture. But yeah, so I'm at Madam Seduction. I also am the host and creator of Kink Conversation, which is a safe space for BIPOC, LGBTQIAP, you know, plus people to come and talk about pleasure, learn about pleasure in a safe space. Every Thursday since the pandemic, we've been hosting a meetup at 7:00. Each meetup is themed something different. So first Thursday is an educational class. It's going to teach you something about sex. Second Thursday is the Black Queer Pleasure Group, where we're talking about just being Black and queer and trying to find our way through pleasure and what that could mean and tools to help support that. The third Thursday is our Alphabet Stew, which is our poly meetup, poly consensual non-monogamous meetup. And then the final one is Kinks and Drinks, which is our like queer munch, where we're interviewing other queer burlesque performers, kinksters, doms, just people in general. The point of the Kink Conversation is to make education accessible, sex education accessible, kink education accessible, and safe, because there are so few places for us to be able to go and learn and not be, you know, assaulted by like cis normative, heteronormative, fucked up, white centered, you know, go on the list of things. So the Kink Conversation, we really try to like tend to that and create safe space for people like us.
Awesome. All of this is awesome. I hope y'all wrote that down. If not, you need to stop and go back and listen to it again. If you've been listening, you have been listening to the Counter Narrative Show. This episode has been around the politics of pleasure. Thank you so much to our special guests, Bree Renee, Dame Sadie. I appreciate your presence. For folks, if you are watching this live, if you found some information useful that you would like to share, please share this. If you want to type a question under the comment section, I'll be sure to share it later. If you're watching it later when I post it to YouTube in about a week or so, feel free to comment there and I'll still be able to share it with our guests. Thank you again both for sharing your narrative. Thank you all for listening. This has been the Counter Narrative. Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you. It was nice to meet you, Bree.
Nice to meet you. I'll be in touch on social media.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.